Oh, internet. What do we got here? We got, you know what? I think I need to roll my sleeves up. I think I need to roll my sleeves up for this one. Why? Well, because my sleeves just feel like they're choking my wrists. I have kind of long arms, and it's really hard to get sleeves that are really feel comfortable in the right length, so I almost always have to roll them up or slide them up. Just such is life. Such is life. Can't complain, though, because, you know, long arms is handy at times. But anyway, what do we got today? We have the Inertia by Real Orbit in this fancy little wicker basket. It's a tisket, a tasket, it's a spinner in a basket. Ta-da! So it's kind of neat. It's got like just a, you know, little tab that just slides in there. What is that banging? Do you hear that tapping? That is annoying. You can probably hear that. I can hear it. Oh, it stopped. Good. All right. Anyway, so it's a nice little basket. Now these, whoops. Keep bumping that camera stand. These spinners are going to come in this little basket, at least for the first couple of them, I guess. They have this little basket, little handmade little, it says it's handmade, but either way, it's a nice little basket one way or another. It's a nice little thing to keep your spinner in. But what does the spinner look like? Well, it looks like this here. So this is the Inertia by Real Orbit, by a gentleman by the name of Angelo over in Australia. So he had this idea of a spinner he wanted to make. I'm going to see if I can find the video and link it in the description below. I really would at least like to do that because he's got a video where he kind of talks about the whole process of prototyping this and making this and kind of what he wanted to do. And I think it'd just kind of be cool to share that with you guys. So this is the Inertia. So right away looking at it, I mean, it's unique in the sense like there isn't, you know, it doesn't look like a clone of anything else, right? But other than that, you know, it looks kind of like a standard tri-spinner. I will tell you though, there's something about this that is very unique. It's kind of funny. It seems like all the stuff that I'm getting, like the prototype stuff, has been pretty unique. And I mean, again, looking at this, it looks like a regular old spinner, right? In the sense like you think you felt the spinner, you felt them all, but there's something about this guy. Do we want to get into the spin on this? Let's get into the story. Let's do the story time because I've got this one here. So he sent me both of these to review. So this is essentially a prototype, but more or less the finished version. The finished version will be offered in steel and titanium. The finish on this, it's going to be a better finish on the finalized version from what he tells me. So the finishing will just be a little bit better. So the mirror polish will be a little bit better and the finishing on the weights will be a little better. So they're a little rough just as prototypes. But then this is like a super ultra prototype. But this is kind of what he was initially trying to do. So I'm going to take the button off here because we don't really need the button off for what we're doing. There's that knock again. I don't know what that is. It's going to get annoying. Anyway, oops, slipped right in there. He just slipped right in there, didn't he? So essentially, this doesn't have the screws, but there would be two screws that kind of hold the two halves together and pinch the bearing in the middle. And the weights would just slide off and kind of slide onto these little grooves. The issue that he was having is he didn't really want to sacrifice quality, but he also didn't want to charge. He knew kind of what the price point was he was looking for the spinner that he was trying to make, but it was hard trying to get it in that range. So it's about 80 USD for the stainless steel and around 100 in the titanium, but it's from Australia, so the conversion and exchange rate and such may vary. I believe the site's done in Australian dollars. So if you see it as dollars, it's going to look like it's more dollars, but it's Australian dollars, which is like monopoly money, like Canadian dollars. Like that's not real money. Just kidding. I love Australia and Canadians. You guys are actually probably two of my favorite countries. Probably even more than the US right now. But anyway, we won't talk about that. That's not what we're here for. Anyway, I had these two plates. And you can see you put these two plates together. And for the most part, they kind of line up pretty close. But as soon as you started throwing in the bearing. Was this the bearing that was in there? I think so. As soon as you throw in the bearing. And then you put the weights on. And then you try to screw the weights down. He was having issues where it was causing this spacing. And I don't know if we're really going to be able to see it here. This one actually seemed pretty snug, but just the quality wasn't right there. And again, once you screwed it in, and it kind of almost forced the body apart a little bit, tightening into those weights. So it just wasn't getting the quality that he wanted. So he went through a couple different versions. He's got a version, I think if you watch Average Singaporean's video, he's got a version which looks like this sort of groove in the middle of the weights, but it's still the two-piece design, which was another version that he tried. Very good, but we'll set you right there. You can still have some time in the sun. But so this is ultimately what he settled on. So let's take a look at the parts and the pieces here. So But I do appreciate that, like, he went with a design and it just wasn't coming out the way he wanted, so he kind of kept going at it until he got it where he wanted it to be, you know, to where he was satisfied with it. And if you're a maker and you kind of put that effort in to make sure that you're satisfied, then generally your customers are going to be satisfied as well. So, yeah, let's take this out. So it's going to come with an FC Essentials SBV2 is the bearing that he uses. However, if you order this, it looks like he got a bunch of the HC2s, the hybrid ceramic 2s, that he doesn't really like. He actually, hang on, where is it? I'm gonna pull this up just because I strongly disagree. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't pull up someone else's opinions like this. But he's like, the first takers will receive the spinner and the handmade box and some free bearings on the website for anyone who wishes to place them in the cart. These bearings are not the best quality in my opinion, but I was not able to get them replaced so people can help themselves. These are the HC2 from FC Essentials. HC2 is my favorite bearing, but I can get why he doesn't like it. So I don't think I would go as far as to say it's not the highest quality bearing. You know, because of how loose it is, but I absolutely love this bearing, and I really like how it feels in there. So I'm going to put it in there. However, I've got to give you a word of warning. Now, this is a prototype version, and I actually found in this one, this sticks a little bit if you don't get it just, whoops, get it just right. So what are we going to be fussing with this for 20 minutes? Come on. Come on, Hobby Timmy. All right. All right, so now the tolerant, because of how much play the SBV2 bearings have, or the super bearings have, the HC2s. Actually, I think it wants to go like this. I think the tolerance is a little bit better. It actually can rub on the body. Because the tolerance on these buttons is super, super thin. And these buttons just are a little too tight for an HC2. You get rubbed, so I don't want to do that too much. But I do want to point out on these buttons that this is a nod to the company Real Orbit, so it's got a little dot with a little ring going around it. And before I take these buttons off, these buttons are pretty good. They do the job. They're not as deep as something like a Kong button. You know, my personal Stonewash Kong buttons, which I really, really enjoy. Also, just while we're looking at it, completely unrelated, this one has like some sort of like ringing type effect. You can't feel it, but in certain reflections you can see it. It kind of actually looks kind of cool, like it has some little depth to it, even though it's completely smooth. Anyway, but these buttons kind of remind me of this button, so I kind of wanted to use them. But they're good buttons. They're not too deep, depending on the situation. They don't feel like they offer the most grip if like you've got those super winter dry fingers, but that's an issue that a lot of buttons have. Otherwise, they're fine. So they're not super dished, but they still work. But I'm gonna throw these buttons on here because I kind of want to talk about it with this bearing in there, and I think you know, it's just how I like it a little bit more. It still works fine the other way around, but yeah, that HC2 bearing, man, I just love it. It just feels so fast. So I get, again, while he says it's not the best quality, or get why he doesn't like it in his opinion, but I don't think I would say it's not a quality bearing. But we know we love FC Essential bearings over here, so look at it go. All right, so we're 8 minutes in. Let's finally talk about the spin on this guy. That's what you guys have really been waiting for, right? How's it spin, Tim? Tell me how it spins. So, first and foremost, not first and foremost, right? We know, I did that one intentionally. The thing that makes this thing so unique is look at how much space there is between these arms. These are actually, the arms are almost like square here in the middle, with as tall and as wide as they are. So they're actually pretty long. Let's get oh, I had a stubby right there. I put up my little octopuses. That's the only reason these guys are there, but I realized since I had an octopus for each corner, I should put an octopus up here, right? But like looking at it compared to a stubby, it's probably not doing a good job, but it's actually a relatively large spinner. Maybe we look at it next to a Hydra. Woody. Let's get out the Woody Hydra. Because if you've got a Woody Hydra. Right, it's a little long, and the Hydra's a relatively, I don't know if I'd say a big spinner, but it's a little larger than a Hydra. So anyway, so you've got these kind of longer arms, but also, let's look at the Hydra again just for a second. The Hydra's got a pretty big button in middle to the body, where this has, like, these are 19mm Kong buttons, and they're just about the size of the body, so you actually get a ton of space in here, and that does some pretty interesting things. A lot of times with that much space, you would think it would be hard to catch the arms of the spinner, but it's still not. It gives you lots of room to kind of get in between there and wind up. It does feel very unique, and not like a lot of other spinners. much like the Hydra, it's got cutouts in the middle and it's got the weight on the outside. So when you throw it, you can feel that mass more on the outside. So it actually throws and spins pretty good. I'm a little surprised at the spin times I got on this. I thought I would probably get a little bit more, but it's still pretty decent. I was getting, with the HC2 in here, the super bearing, or not the super bearing, it is a super bearing, but not the SBV2, which is the super bearing version 2. The HC2 that I've got in here, I was getting almost 8 minutes. Now I had one spin and I neglected to pay attention to which one was which, and I think I actually was getting less spin time on a vertical, which surprises me when that happens. But I was getting 7 minutes and between 7 and 8 minutes on both table and vertical spins with this bearing, which is pretty good. That's a pretty respectable spin time for a spinner that's not, all things considered, well, it's not super heavy here. Right, so 65 grams is not a super massive heavy spinner. Super massive black hole. What's that song? Somebody's gonna know that. That's popular now. I was listening to it before they were popular. Before they were in the what the hell was that crappy vampire movie? Twilight. Before they were on the Twilight soundtrack. That's where my wife discovered them. Anyway, so yeah, it spins really well. It's very unique. There's something about having all this space in between the arms, yet it's still easy to catch and fidget with. So you can kind of do, this is like fun, right? Like I can do some bouncing that is kind of hard to do with a lot of spinners, because you look at something like, I don't really have space between my fingers, right? Or, you know, you look at something like the opposite, like this is designed more for hugging your finger and moving with it. So it moves with your finger, but it doesn't, I guess you can get your fingers out there and try to bounce it, but it's nowhere near the same thing. Like this just bounces. And I love that looseness. I've gotten so used to it with HC2, is like I've come to like almost require it in a spinner. But that's fine, Angelo. You're entitled to your opinion. I don't mean to keep bringing that up. It's just, it's something I can't help but keep appreciating. Yeah, so that's really good. With all this wide space in here, you would think it would be an issue to do these kind of pulls. But I quite often find my finger on the outside of that arm, and even when I don't, when I get inside, it's just right, it's still there in position, so it works. You know, this. There's a lot of room to get your finger in between. Preloaded flicks, great. And on this prototype, I watched about 3/4 of Average Singaporean's video on this, and I don't have the same issue on this that he had mentioned having. Now with this one, and maybe, again, there were a bunch of prototypes and the finishing is gonna be tighter, but on mine, there isn't any real issue. Like these weights line up pretty good here with this little, I don't know, tongue groove thing that you call it. I mean, you can feel it a little bit, but I haven't found any hot spot issues with any of like the corners of this. Maybe this a little bit could be because the arms are relatively long. You can really throw it. Oh, that's so good. It really throws really well. So I haven't run into any hot spot issues, and the finish on the final one should be a little bit better. Let me just show you how this comes apart. So when you purchase this guy, you have the option of 3 different weights. You've got brass, stainless steel, and copper, see? Throw some copper weights on the end of that arm, see? Coppers can't catch me when you're weighted down with copper, see? Do I want to take them all off? Yeah, let's take them all off real quick. Oh, they're pretty easy to take off. Bzzz, bzzz. So yeah, so there's gonna have a bunch of different weights. Now he's gonna have some sort of either Damascus or Damasteel available shortly after launch. I guess we should talk about the launch on this as well. He's expecting to get them to him around March 26th, so it's a pre-order right now, and he's expecting to ship them out in early, ooh, that sounds good. I've spun this a little bit, but I didn't really notice that ringing. And I don't even run into like hotspot issues with it like this, although it probably should be. And I bet if I really spun it a lot, I would find that. Yeah, I'd probably find that to be quite a bit hot spotty. But it's not designed to be spun like this. But I bet if you just tumbled it with the weights off, the weights would still fit on, and you're going to be screwing them down. But you just take just these little corners are what you can catch. This right here is rounded enough where it doesn't really feel like an issue. Ooh, yeah, that hurt. But anyway, so he's going to have Damasteel weights shortly after release. But yeah, he's thinking of doing, I think tungsten and mokutai and maybe mokum. What's the copper and brass one? Mokume? Yeah, Mokutai Mokumi are going to be options he's probably going to do at some point. So we just tighten those back on, nothing crazy. And I forget which size Allen key or Allen wrench he said it was. I remember the first time someone said they were looking for an Allen key, and I didn't know what they were talking about, and I should have. Like, and I don't know, they asked like 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, oh, you mean an Allen wrench? So now I've started to call them keys, or at least acknowledge the fact that some people call them keys, but I think it's wrong. It's an Allen wrench. What else can we say? I feel like there was more that I wanted to say, and I didn't want to forget anything, but yeah, the dude seems really cool, really chill. I like the attention to detail he's put into something like this, and yeah, I think it's something where it's unique enough where it warrants, you know, somebody's attention and everything like that. I think it's something you guys you should look into and should check out. Now, I don't know the details and all the shipping and the shipping times and everything like that from Australia. Oh, I did want to say, like, the spin profile on this thing is really cool. So with the polish and with kind of the arms, so it's a pretty like flat. It doesn't really like swell up. But the spin profile makes it look kind of like it's swelling up, you know, like it's got a bit of a curve to it where it definitely does not. But it's a very interesting one to look at while spinning. There's a lot of little, I shouldn't say chamfers, but like with sort of it like rounding in the cutouts, the light reflects off it very differently as it spins, right? So you see those reflections in a lot of different places. So when we really crank on it, two-handed spin, right? And you get some really interesting effects. So really digging this. Yeah, the one thing I really wanted to get across in this review was that it feels very unique. That space between the arms is something to be acknowledged and appreciated. These flat sides give your finger lots to catch and rock into, and then especially once you hit out here. Preloading off of here, I started talking about it, and then I got distracted by the hot spots. But with the way these weights are raised and all these corners and arms and stuff like that, you really get plenty of grip. Like, you can see, like, my fingers are ready to rock and roll there. That was a little overkill, a little exaggeration trying to show it off. My fingers have been really, really dry. I actually lotioned up pretty good last night for trying to do this review. Like, you can see how like dry they were starting to get. Anyway. Anything else we need to say on the Inertia by Real Orbit? I guess I didn't really say anything specific downside-wise or criticisms or anything like that. I mean, it's a pretty solid spinner. I think, you know, aesthetically, I think my biggest criticism is it doesn't really look like it's going to feel when looking at it. Like, I wish there was some way to really appreciate how this thing would feel just by looking at it. But it's much more than what it looks like on face value, right? You look at it and it just looks like another spinner, but it does feel so tremendously different from so many other spinners. It's very balanced. It doesn't have a lot of wobble or anything like that. What you could probably do, even if there was a little bit of wobble, you could either take these weights off and try and sand a little bit down off of them, or even better yet, maybe use a little piece of paper or something behind to try and push one of the weights further out to try and balance it. So being that it's got removable weights, you've got some options for trying to balance this guy. So I think that's kind of interesting that you could kind of do that if you did have any balance issues, but it feels dead smooth in the hand. So. Right, I'm almost getting away from doing this kind of a test. I like this test. And this is actually pretty good, so it's actually good. Glad I showed you this test on this one. But it's really how it feels in hand. Like, it's one thing to have it look balanced, and it's another thing for it to have it feel balanced, right? Like, if we take this, right, that's pretty noticeable off there. Feels very smooth. So, anyway. Anywho, internet. Yeah, I think we're warming up to 20 minutes here, so I think that's plenty for what we need to say. Yeah, not a ton of negatives to say about this thing. So, yeah, it's good at galloping spins. Yeah, every way I've tried to fidget with this guy, it works. I think he did mention he was kind of designing it for maximum fidgetability. So it is, it's good even just to kind of manipulate in the hand. He sent me a little video kind of showing that, and with the way these arms are kind of like very similar, almost like, not like a circle, but like the same height and width, right? Like I said, I guess it's a square, Tim. Right, like it's good just to kind of handle and manipulate in your hand. And then you probably could could you knuckle roll it? I haven't really tried doing this, but I bet you could I bet you could get good at that. I'm not doing it right now for sure. But I bet there's someone out there that could do that. Anyway, it just throws really nice. It feels good. It's a good fidgeter. It's unique. It's got some unique styling. The fact that the weights are removable gives you some customizability options. If you order it from them, throw some of those super bearings, some of the HC2s he's got. They show up in the cart at $0. So you just put them in the cart. He's just trying to get rid of them. So, and they're my favorite bearings. So get in on some of that. So look at that. All right, we just hit 20 minutes, so I think that's where we need to be. I am going to, let me take this off one more time. Again, I'm just using these buttons because they're still very similar in style to his buttons. I actually should have used these buttons if we're talking about a similar style, right? But again, they cause some rubbing with the HC2. So if you get the HC2s, you're going to need to use spacers if you're going to use his buttons. But other than that, there it is, the Inertia by Real Orbit and Angelo, the Australians. Give some Australian down under love, and yeah, if you dig this, pick one of these up because I think it's definitely a worthwhile spinner. Oh, 2 thumbs up. I started to say that. It's a 2-thumber. It's definitely a 2-thumber. All right, internet. Kisses. Oh, let's do this again. Let's fade it out to the button. Let's fade.